Good morning. Welcome to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs, Wednesday, May 10th here. We are beginning our work today looking at Senate proposal of amendment to H470. And Mr. Anderson, could you please tell us what the Senate's proposing to do with our miscellaneous alcoholic beverages law?
Good morning, everyone. Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel for the record. You should have in front of you draft 3.2 of the Senate Committee on Economic Development's amendment to H470. The formal amendment that passed the body has not been prepared yet, which is why we're going to work through the committee's recommendation. So working through that document, section 1, not a change from what you all passed. This is a hard cider update. I will note that in sections 3, 4, 7, and 8 that follow this, those hard cider changes that you all passed out continue throughout the bill. In section 2, we have an update within the fees section. There are 2 changes here. First, subdivision 9, as you see it here, was actually further amended by the Senate Committee on Finance to eliminate all of the references to the number of permits that can be issued, so that this would just say for each permit it's $70. Then the name of the festival permit is changed to the sampling event permit, and the educational sampling event permit is changed to limited event permit. And we'll get into those sections later, but there are some updates to both of those permits, substantive changes to both of those permits. Section 3, this is something initially that this committee passed out in your version of H470. This is the increase in the number of 4th class licenses that can be issued to a manufacturer rectifier from 10 to 20. Senate Economic Development further amended the 4th class license statute. And I will note up front that the changes are different for farmers market locations versus retail tasting locations. So what the Senate did is they increased the volume limitations that may be served at these locations, but only for the tasting outlets or sampling outlets. Farmers market limits stay in place. You will note that for the farmers market, it remains 2 ounces of malt vinous or ready to drink spirits beverages with a total of 8 ounces, and 1/4 ounce of spirits or fortified wines with a total of 1 ounce. However, at those tasting room or retail shop locations, the Senate is proposing here to allow 4th class license holders to serve an aggregate total of 16 ounces of malt beverages or hard cider, 12 ounces of vinous beverages or ready to drink spirits beverages, and not more than 1/4 ounce of spirits or fortified wine with a total of 2 ounces. The background of this is that this will allow manufacturers at their tasting room locations to serve what is colloquially known as full pours.
So thank you. That was kind of my question. So it's almost operating like a bar now in a retail.
Very similar, but if they serve a full pour, it would be essentially 1 drink or 1.5 drinks for the malt beverages.
And that's the limit as I read this. Is I understand that correctly? So if they do 1 full pour, they get 1.
Yes.
Or they could do 8 2-ounce samplers in a flight.
Yes.
Okay.
They just got to play internally, be aware of the ounces poured between. If they have different classifications being served, they got to be aware of the ounces going out.
Hang on and represent
I have a couple of questions for that. So the patron can have a little bit of malt beverage, a little bit of hard cider, but it can't total more than 16 ounces, or they can only choose to taste 1. How is this going to work?
We'll get to a little bit of a wrinkle in a moment, but again, these are licenses that are acquired by a manufacturer, and the manufacturer makes 1 type of beverage. So it would be 16 ounces of beverages served by that manufacturer.
Okay, got it. So it's only, like, for instance, at a vineyard that has a retail shop would only be serving various wines. So if you wanted to taste 4 different wines, it would have to be 3 ounces or less each. Okay,
Yes.
that's understandable. Thank you. Now, I have one last question. How does this work with our statute that alcohol and food need to be served together?
That does not apply, at least the statutory provisions, to these locations. Those, in statute, it's for first and third class locations. But there are division of liquor control rules adopted by the Board of Liquor and Lottery that require that food is available at these locations.
So these locations will have to have some kind of pre-made food because they don't have kitchen licenses.
Correct, and that may be bags of pretzels
Okay.
or something like that.
I recall this discussion from 4 years ago, and I'm just trying to
The
review.
popcorn
Does not say club exemption.
Well,
Thank you.
the club exemption was extended to manufacturers so that they can acquire first-class licenses, which would effectively allow them to operate a bar on their manufacturing premises. So in subdivision C1, this subdivision under current law allows these fourth-class license holders to sell alcoholic beverages manufactured by up to 5 different manufacturers. And that's at one location. Currently, this increases that so that they can do that at 2 fourth-class license locations.
Representative Waters Evans.
I figured it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, in section,
Sorry. You said unopened, but then this statute reads unopened container or distribute by the glass alcoholic beverages produced by not more than 5 additional manufacturers or required. So there again, I'm going back to, isn't that really like a bar?
they
Yeah.
can serve pours, yes. The service limitations still stay in place.
Same type of alcoholic beverage at that location, or could, for instance, a winery also sell cider or beer?
I will circle back to that question in a moment because I have to check on subdivision C2, which is omitted because it's not being changed. My recollection is that it's not restricted to the alcoholic beverage that the manufacturer produces.
So therefore, my question would be then is if you're distributing by the glass, how would that retail outlet keep track of whether a person is having 16 ounces total or 12 ounces total? That's going to be a lot of on the fly math for a bartender or whatever you call a cashier who is at that retail outlet.
Server.
Yes, thank you. I understood when it was just the same type of alcohol at one location, but this I don't.
It is not restricted to the beverages that the manufacturer itself produces. So you could have multiple alcoholic beverages, which is why I said there's a wrinkle that we would get to about the service limitations, that this may be fairly read to allow them to serve at these 2 locations up to the service limitation for each. And that's because the conjunction that is used is and.
So somebody could taste 16 ounces of a malt beverage or hard cider and 12 ounces of a vinous beverage or ready-to-drink spirits beverage, and not more than 1/4 ounce of spirits or fortified wine. Yeah, that's problematic.
Yes. And subdivision 1, because it allows at the licensee's discretion to distribute the following amounts, there's no limitation in that lead-in language that would legally bind the manufacturer, 4th-class license holder here, to serve just the limit of 1 alcoholic beverage at those 2 locations. So you are correct that it would be fair to read this subdivision B to allow at the 2 tasting rooms now where multiple manufacturers' beverages can be served, that they could serve up to the limit of each one of these, with the aggregate total effectively being 3 or 4 alcoholic beverage servings.
Thank you. Did the Senate have any discussion about this when they put this in?
Yes, at least to the extent that they were acknowledging and had discussion around this being closer to a bar serving amount than a tasting room.
And there is a different license if you're a bar versus a serving tasting room.
First or third class. The trick with the first or third class license that a manufacturer can acquire is that it has to be contiguous with their manufacturing location. So the example that was brought up repeatedly in Senate Economic Development is the manufacturing location at the end of muddy Class 4 road that no one can get to. This allows for the satellite tasting room where you can serve full pours, which is currently allowed at the manufacturing location.
But that, it must be the same property.
For the first or third class license, not for the fourth.
For the fourth could operate satellite.
But here you can have a satellite location where you serve up to these aggregate amounts.
And that's really a bar.
Well, so can I understand this a little better? Because I don't have the wealth of experience that Representatives Byron and Hanger have with liquor lottery policy. So what we're saying here is fourth class license. This is a manufacturer who's also able to sell other manufacturers' products at their tasting room. Because of the use of the conjunction "and" in subsection B, they would be able to, if we pass this, serve 16 ounces of hard cider, full pour, and a full pour of wine or ready to drink spirit beverages, and up to 2 ounces of a spirit or 4 or 5 wine. So they could basically have a shot, a glass of wine, and a full pour of beer or cider. They could serve 3 drinks.
3 drinks.
It could be read that way.
You state.
Okay. Representative Higley.
Is that fourth class license also approved by the towns, just like all the other licenses?
This question may have also come up in the Senate and is something that I can circle back to with you, because I believe that the department pointed out that the definitions for some of these licenses have hidden requirements for local approval. So let me just check the fourth class license.
While Tucker's checking that, so what I'd like to do, since our time is limited this morning and there are a number of amendments that we need to hear for S39, I say we won't take a position on 470 today, obviously. Tucker can take us through the rest of the bill, which I hope is not as substantive in its changes as this is, but it sounds like maybe there are some things. And then we'll move on to look at the change to the logo charter. So let's kind of jog through the rest of this and target it for now.
Section 4 is the hard cider technical update. Section 5, we're on page 4 now. This is a change to the educational sampling event permit. First, to rename it the limited event permit. Second, to update this so that it would be a generally applicable and available event permit, where generic forms of events could acquire this permit to purchase invoiced volumes of alcoholic beverages and serve them at the events. Think of these as the book festival, the garlic festival, things like that. There was an interpretive issue with the festival permit statute, which had been intentionally written to only apply to festivals that are based in the service of alcoholic beverages, beer fest, wine fest, think of things like that, where these other kinds of festivals could not acquire a permit to serve alcoholic beverages. So the intent of amending this educational sampling event permit is to allow those events to get a permit to serve alcoholic beverages at their non-alcohol focused festivals. All of the same requirements stay in place. The permit holders allowed to purchase invoiced volumes of alcoholic beverages from manufacturers, packagers, wholesale dealers, or importers that are licensed in Vermont or another jurisdiction. They are allowed to be transported into the site and sold by the glass to the public by the permit holder. The same permit limitations stay in place. That is not more than 4 permits may be held by the same person in any year, and that the permits are valid for not more than 4 days. The remainder of the changes you see are condensing down the tax payment requirements and the requirements for compliance with DLLs, for example, server, education, and other licensing requirements into essentially one subsection instead of 6.
Representative Pango.
Thank you. Tucker, they do not have to buy from a Vermont, 802 store, but a bar has to buy from an 802 store?
Well, the licensed wholesale dealer in this case is going to be the Department of Liquor and Lottery for spirits and fortified wines.
But what about retail? It didn't say something about retail outlet, or did I read that wrong? Directly from a manufacturer, packager, wholesale dealer or importer. Okay, I guess that, it doesn't say retail outlet. Thank you.
Section 6, I'm on page 7 now. We moved through a lot of strike-throughs through very detailed tax language that was copied and pasted from another section of Title VII at some point in the 1990s. In Section 6, this is the special event permit statute. Currently, special events permits may be acquired 10 in a year for a given physical location for 4 days at a time. And this changes that temporal scope to allow the permit holder to acquire 1 permit a year for the physical location for up to 40 days. It is the same temporal limitation, 40 days, but grants the permit holder more flexibility to spread those 40 days out throughout the year. Because if it is 10 permits for 4 days at a time, that is effectively a 10-week limitation. But 40 days in a year could be 1 day a week for 40 weeks or 2 for 20.
Okay.
Section 7. This is an update to the festival permit statute. There are only a couple changes to flag here. First is that the festival permit name is being changed to the sampling event permit. You continue on to page 8. This is what I was talking about earlier, where when this was amended in 2021, this statute was intended to be targeted at the festivals that were based around alcoholic beverages. So in that subsection B, you had the primary purpose test. Who has to get this permit? Festivals where the primary purpose is sampling or service of alcoholic beverages. The Senate is proposing to get rid of the primary purpose test and instead have a bright line standard. You have to get a festival permit if you're going to have more than 5 sampling outlets at the festival and the expected attendance is more than 50 people. It's a conjunctive element, 5 or more sampling outlets, 50 or more people in attendance.
So if the St. Albans Farmers Market wants to stay under the festival permit, they could only have 4 people that were offering samples.
So the farmer's market itself is likely going to be a location where those fourth class licensees have their permitted tent serving location, whatever it is.
And that was the first thing we talked about.
Yes.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is if there are more than 4 of those fourth class licensees there, does suddenly that become a festival? The way that this is set up. Or is each one of those tents its own little fourth class thing and its own footprint, and or could it be read either way? And this is very confusing.
I don't know if I'm fast enough on my feet this morning to analyze that, but I can get a note back to you about what the overlap would be between multiple manufacturers at a single location and the way this standard is being implemented.
Okay, Representative Hango, and then we're gonna park this, so we'll have more time on this, but.
Okay, I was just going to build off on your question, Mr. Chair, that like say you have a music festival. Somebody's playing in a band outdoors. You have to have 5 separate tasting outlets, and you have to have more than 50 people attending that musical festival to fall under this.
To trigger this permit requirement.
Sampling event permit. So if 20 people showed up and you had 5 sampling outlets, it would not trigger this.
Correct. And the permit holders would likely operate under a special event permit to have their tents there.
Okay, and the farmer's market really is a separate, we're not talking about farmer's markets on this. Thank you. Does that help, Mike?
Yep.
I think it does. I'm gonna have to trust you all who know more than I do about.
We're going to move quickly through, respecting the committee's time, the up and down volume limitation changes here. For each of the types of beverage alcohol categories served at a festival, there are in statute now limitations on the amount of those beverages that can be served, both in the single serving and in the aggregate total. In subdivision 2A for malt beverages and hard ciders, the aggregate total doesn't change, but they are permitted to serve up to 16 ounces in the single serving instead of 12, which is the current limitation. Then in subdivision D to E, and this goes on to page 9, the Senate is proposing to move down the aggregate total of drink units that may be served at a festival where there are multiple types of beverage alcohol being served. Currently, it is not more than 6 drink units containing 3.6 fluid ounces or 84 grams of pure ethyl alcohol. And instead, this is now being changed to 5 standard drink units as defined by the World Health Organization. Section 8 is a hard cider change. Section 9, this was the repeal of the sunset. It was going to indefinitely, or until the General Assembly makes a different decision in the future, codify 7 VSA Section 230, which was alcoholic beverages to go. The Senate has removed that repeal of the sunset and instead extended the sunset for 2 years to July 1st, 2025. And in Section 10, this committee passed out a study requirement for a public health impact study by the Department of Health. And the Senate has changed that to a DLL study on public safety impacts. It would be due January 15th, 2025. And would set the General Assembly up in the 2025 session to determine if the sunset should either be extended beyond 2025 or permanently repealed. Those are the changes in the SPOA.
We may come back to this afternoon. I want to move on from 470 now because there are clearly a bunch of questions and give time for our liquor and lottery team to talk a little bit with the department about how to proceed with this bill. Representative Waters, did you have a question?
Thanks. Yeah, if I have a question about something, I don't think it needs Tucker. We don't need to talk about it right now, but when do I ask it?
Well, we'll take this back up at some point before we take a position on it.
So
we can offline to Tucker or one of our reps that knows more about this, or Charles from the department, I think is a great person to ask questions. Okay. We have half an hour to do a lot, and I didn't expect this to take as long as it did. So sorry about that. Ashley, I think you're on deck to talk to us about the Senate's proposal of amendment to H 488 Town of Ludlow Charter, which hopefully is easier to understand than.
Yes, this is a little bit more straightforward, I think. So, all right, I'm here to talk to, first, Ashley Angel, Law Clerk, Office of Legislative Counsel for the record. It's good to see you all. I'm here to talk about H 488 for the Charter of Ludlow Amendment. Addition, I guess. So, like we spoke about last time, Ludlow did not have a charter and has established a charter. Just to recap, the first section remains the same. The second section, section 1 of the second section also remains the same. The change that the Senate proposed was to section 2 of section 2. This particular amendment tightens the select board's sole authority to list articles to be voted upon during town meetings or special meetings. This amendment specifies that the select board may determine what items are to be voted upon, except as otherwise provided by law or by a vote of the Ludlow citizens. They are to use Australian ballot under state law for items such as mergers, bonding, or charter amendments. And then they have the ability to use Australian ballot if determined by the voters under state law, town budgets, public questions, and election of officers for the town. So the new language that the Senate proposed comes directly from the Underhill Charter. So Underhill already uses this language. And that is the newest update to H 488.
Thanks. Yeah. Would it be fair to understand this as providing a little more specificity to the relationship of the power that we're giving them to choose to put items up for Australian ballot, and that they can't kind of just selectively pick? I think that was the issue that Senate Gov.Ops had, that they could say, okay, well, this issue we want to go Australian ballot, but this one we're going to do as Florida. Is that?
Exactly. Okay. It just puts it straight out there so people don't get confused.
Committee, do we have any questions about the Ludlow Charter? I'm reluctant to take a position without Representative Byron in the room, but I know he's probably talking a little bit about.
Do we need to do a straw poll or a vote?
So if we were going to do, so I can just, since it would be a straw poll, if we are moving to concur, then I can just ask him his opinion after and add his number to that. So you move to concur. All those in favor of a motion to concur? 1, 2, 3. That's unanimous in the room. So we got 10 so far, and I'll see if I can get us up to 12 or at least 11. Great. Well, Ashley, nice work. Thank you. I know that the Senate had a little bit of heartburn about the Ludlow's presented language, and this seems like a good way to give them what they want. I will tell the committee, I should have said this earlier, that I did hear anecdotally from Representative Nickel from Ludlow that the town felt like this gave them the authority that they needed. So it's good. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we have Representative Harrison here to present proposal for amendment to our 39, not related to compensation benefits for members of the Vermont General Assembly. Welcome, Representative Harrison.
Welcome. For the record, my name is Jim Harrison, a state representative from the beautiful little town of Chittenden. And I don't mean to add to your workload this morning, but I have just 3 little amendments.
So before you begin, Representative Harrison, our fabulous committee assistant just told me that you substituted language. So I want everybody to go to their device, refresh, and make sure we have the right documents under Representative Harrison's name before we get going.
3 of them? 1, 2,
There's 3. One changed. The one that was short that said strike section 2, it now strikes sections 2 to 4, and then add some language back in on the expenses.
Okay, so we have,
And I'm open to whatever order you want to take these.
so the way they're listed on the website, the first one is, says Harrison Amendment Health Insurance Premium. So we can go in whatever order.
Whatever you would like.
Yeah, so if you could give us, we'll do them in order just so we can
Okay, sure.
keep track. Thank you.
So, I'm not sure how it's identified on your thing, but this amendment, which deals with the health insurance, because we receive pay from the legislature, from the state, currently during the session. What this does is treats legislators as employees when we're in session. So for the months, typically, and it obviously could change, but typically January through May, we would be treated as, legislators would be treated as employees and could purchase the state health plan with the 20% copay. After the session we adjourn, you could still purchase the state health plan, but the member would be available. The cost would be 100% of the premium. Currently, as some of you may be aware, legislators, for example, can opt into the state dental plan. We pay 100% of that. I happen to be on that, and I pay each month for that premium. Obviously, the premium on the dental plan is a lot less than it would be for health insurance. And just before I forget, I want to acknowledge Ledge Consul Jen Carby is here, who has been extraordinarily patient with me over the last 2 days as I come up with suggestions in my head and pass them on to her, and she puts it into words, including this change this morning on the other one, the other amendment. This one didn't change.
Sympathies to Ledge Council Carby. Does your action in any way dilute the existing designation of us as state employees, period? By dividing us from active to inactive?
I would defer to Ledge Council. I don't think so, but
Jen Kirby, Legislative Council. Legislators are treated as state employees and not state employees for different purposes throughout the statute. So I don't think whether you're receiving payment or not payment, the language is still in the health insurance statute, including legislators in the definition of employee for purposes of health insurance. It's just changing the premium amounts based on the time of year. But legislators are not, per se, state employees for all purposes.
Is there another section in statute that specifically designates legislators as state employees, period?
Don't believe so. That's something I want to check with Damien, but it's my understanding that, for example, legislators are considered state employees for purposes of workers' compensation if something happens to you in your legislative duties, but not necessarily for other purposes like retirement plans.
We were sort of talking about that category in terms of compensation and other bills.
So I want to stay really focused on each of these amendments. So what this amendment does, if I understand it, Representative Harrison, is that it, instead of having access to the state employees plan with a 20-80 split, we would have the executive branch access, but that would be 100% premium during the off session. And then what's the split, or like what would the premiums look like for a person during the legislative session? I remember
It would be the same as what's in your bill, the 20.
it would be the 2080.
Right.
Okay.
And if I just may say, health insurance is a very, very valuable benefit. We all should have health insurance. I'm not disagreeing with that. And I know you postponed it for 1 year with your amendment to look at some of the potential complications with Health Connect and whatnot. However, I don't know that I want to go and say, you know, the state share for a family plan for the cheaper is 27,000 and change. That dwarfs our current compensation. And I think that's a very hard sell to my constituents anyhow. Obviously, everyone's different on that, but that's a lot of money. So.
Representative Rolinski.
This is something that's going to be taken up by the working group. And as such, I would move that we find this is an unfavorable amendment.
So there's a motion on the floor to find the First Amendment regarding healthcare not favorable. Is there further discussion? Representative Boyden, do you have a record of action? Because we're going to need to take each one on each of the four amendments. Any discussion, Representative Hooper?
So essentially, we're still leaving the subject of this discussion to the working group to bring something back.
So my understanding would be, and should correct me if I'm wrong, but if we find this amendment not favorable, then yes, we are leaving the healthcare discussion in the working group. But, you know, to be clear, as it's written in January of 2025, legislators will have access to the state employees plan year round. So where I come down on this, in addition to the point that Representative Rowicki made, is that I think what we're trying to do is make it so that folks who inevitably, in many cases, have to lose benefits or leave a full-time job or go from full-time to part-time in order to do this legislative service, or at least have access to a plan year-round that they could buy into. And this would make it so that once you're not serving in the full session, then you've got to go and buy your own plan. And I think that the awkwardness for many people is something that we're trying to address. And I would lean the other way. And I think this is a point where many of us are just going to agree to disagree. Representative Hango.
Thank you. Question for either the representative or Ledge Council. Under this amendment, if it were passed, would not be just the funding change? It wouldn't be like somebody has to go out and get their own plan in the off session. They would still continue with the same plan, but the payment structure would change.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
Yes.
So really there is no awkwardness in that. The only change would be that instead of paying 20% of the premium for 4 or 5 months, however long we're in session, the member would pay 100% when we're not in session, correct? Thank you.
Representative Waters Evans.
Thank you. I'm wondering if this were the situation, if it would still kind of trigger that same issue that we were having previously with people who are receiving, you know, because of their income level or whatever, would it therefore mean that they couldn't be a part of that program where they're subsidized their healthcare and stuff? Would it do the same thing as the first?
I believe it would, at least during the legislative session, but that's probably an open question that is another reason for us to hesitate here, because we don't really have time to fully understand the implications.
Because I was going to say, I think I appreciate the intent of it, which is to make sure that it's seems fair, you know what I mean, for the people in all the rest of Vermont and also us, but at the same time, I think it might, considering that health insurance thing, it might make things worse in a way for people and more prohibitive for them to be able to serve. So I hesitate without like a lot more research.
That was sort of my question. So, if I remember Mr. Fisher's words correctly, we would still be making a health plan available so that people that currently get subsidies would not be eligible for subsidies.
I can clarify a little bit. Jen Kirby, Legislative Council. I think that's true as far as automatic eligibility, but there would still be the financial determination, the affordability determination. So if it was 100%, if the employee share was 100% of the premium, then it would be that affordability of whether that constituted more than 9.12% of their income. And if so, they could be eligible for subsidies during that off-session period of a government exchange plan. But they would not be eligible for subsidies. And potentially not be able to stay on the same, they may have to go on different plans, state employee plan and then exchange.
So seeing that we still have three more amendments that we need to hear, I'd like to take a position on this one. So absent any objection, the motion on the table is to find this unfavorable. So a yes, a yes is to say stick with the committee's position on the bill and a respectful rejection of the amendment. So a yes is opposed to adopting the amendment. So that's always a little confusing. So just to be clear, yes, if on the motion to find it unfavorable is against the amendment. Clear as mud, right? So the clerk shall commence the call roll.
Representative Barnum?
Yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Hango?
No.
Representative Morgan?
No.
Representative Cooper of Burlington?
Yes.
Representative Murphy?
Yes.
Representative Chase?
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans?
Yes.
Representative Cooper of Randolph? Representative Nugent?
Yes.
Representative Higley?
No,
Representative McCarthy?
Yes.
8-3-1.
All right. Thank you very much, Representative Harrison.
One would you like next?
Next amendment that we have on our page, and of course, my hyper secure computer just made me type in my password again. Just a second here. Next one up is the independent compensation entity. This is under Jen Carby's name. It's an addition to the study committee.
Yes, I've had conversations with different members, and I fully recognize that, the optics of voting for your own pay increase, which is why we don't revisit this very often, other than the automatic COLA or step increases that we tie to what we give the constitutional officers. And some states, my understanding is, and I haven't researched this very much, but some states do have some kind of independent entity that sets, like I've never in my life had a job where I set my own pay. It was always a board or some other boss or something, that supervisor that did that for me. So this would ask the study committee that you've set up in the bill to look at that. And if there's a good model out there that another state is utilizing, then we could consider adopting such a model going next year when we come back for the future. Doesn't tie us to doing anything.
So Representative Hanko, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. This is the first I've heard of this, so I think it's a really great addition. If we're gonna have a working group anyway that's looking at compensation, I think this is a good idea. Thank you.
Representative Higley.
I think I mentioned this in our argument when we voted it out, that there are states out there that have an independent commission or whatever you want to call it, that does look at that compensation package for legislators. So I would support it.
Representative Byron.
As someone in their professional life who sets their own pay, I mean, it's not a total anomaly. That being said, we do have a study going in the bill. Who knows what they're going to talk about, but my ultimate point is that this is the way the legislature's handled this since pretty much the beginning of time within this body. So sticking to the tradition that we've had is my opinion.
So I and want to look at, before I come up with an opinion on this, one part of me is hearing Betsy Ann Rast say, the legislature, the bodies are in charge of their own destiny, and we don't set our own pay. We set each other's pay collectively all together, which I think is a conversation that there's been a little bit of false equivalency around this entire bill around, sort of like each one of us giving ourselves a pay increase. That's not what's happening. We're all collectively, House and Senate, deciding together how a legislator should be compensated. And we're asking this legislative service working group to focus on a few things. So the language in this subsection reads, the working group shall consider and make recommendations on issues involving legislative compensation and benefits, staff and administrative support, the length of legislative session, including, and then it has a list that this would be added to, right?
Correct.
Jen, is that where this falls in I'm just trying to understand exactly where this instance of amendment.
And this would go, yes, this is in the study committee, and it just adds to the items in the study committee would be considering.
If I may say, Mr. Chair, this doesn't bind us to doing anything other than there's a couple models out there, look at them, and it would be up to this committee next year to look at it and say, yeah, it's a good idea, let's look at it, or no, we like the way we've been doing it since the beginning of time, and keep it that way.
I actually kind of agree with you, Representative Harrison. I don't see any harm in looking at this. I'd love to have this sort of shuffled off from our responsibility. Representative Rowicky.
As in the previous, I don't discount this as merit, but we've already setting a group to take these kinds of things on, and I don't know that we need to put in statute that this is a requirement for them.
So I'd like to make a motion then that we approve the draft 1.1 dated 5/9/23, 3:39 p.m. from Senator.
So Representative Higley moves that we find this amendment favorable. And I just wanted to ask, the way the language reads, is this a list of things for the service working group to consider? Or is it, if we adopted Representative Harrison's amendment, would we be saying you must make a recommendation about this particular thing in this way?
So the lead-in language on this piece is that the working group shall consider and make recommendations on issues involving legislative compensation and benefits, other things, including the current compensation and benefits offered to members, including, and this would be in the list. So they would be considering and making recommendations on issues, including options for establishing or engaging in independent entities.
I'm comfortable with that.
So the recommendation could be, we've looked at it and we recommend you don't do it, or here are the options and we recommend this one.
Okay, Representative Henke.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's appropriate because we often ask study committees to do very specific things. I don't think this is asking for anything above and beyond what we typically do. So thank you.
Representative Waters Evans. And Representative.
Thank you. I just wanted to say this idea comes up so often that I think just while there's an opportunity to be a goal, just for it.
Yeah. Representative.
The word options bothered me, still bothers me a little bit. Possibilities would be a better word, but I don't want to hang out on that.
Well, we're just telling them to consider things in this in this milieu. So I don't want to wordsmith too much at this late hour, if that's okay with you, Representative Hoover. Can you live with options?
Fine.
All right, so any further discussion? We have a motion on the table that's a little easier. Favorable is a yes. If you support the amendment, a yes is a yes. Seeing no hands, the clerk shall commence the call the roll.
Representative Byram?
Yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Hinga?
Yes.
Representative Morgan?
Yes.
Representative Cooper Burlington?
Yes.
Representative Markey?
No.
Representative Chase?
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans?
Yes.
Representative Cooper Randolph? So yes.
Is that a yes, Representative Hooper?
Representative Nugent?
Yes.
Representative Haley?
Yes.
Representative McCarthy?
Yes.
11-1-0.
Thank you, Representative Harris. All right, number 3.
Okay. So number 3 relates to the study committee in that you've given a list of charges, including looking at compensation. And I just find it a little ironic that we've presupposed in some sense what those recommendations are because we put in statutory amounts for salary pay in future years. So they don't take effect, sections 2 to 4. What it does is strikes sections 2 to 4 and then puts back in the expense language that is in your amendment. So it was a little easier to construct it this way. And then lets the study committee do their thing, and next year would come back with recommendations as to perhaps where we should be in terms of compensation. And we vote it next year prior to when any of them take effect. In sections 2 to 4, I think section 2 takes effect in 2025. So I don't know what they're going to find. I've glanced through what different states pay now. They're all over the board. They're from $100 a year next door to nothing in New Mexico to, 100+ thousand in New York, which is full time. So I get it. And I also appreciate the work that this committee has had to do getting a bill late in the session on as an important topic at this, and just assuming the Senate did their due diligence, which they may or may not have, and carry over those same numbers. So I'm uncomfortable with maybe they should be more, maybe they should be less. I don't know. I'd like to get the input, the benefit of the study committee before we put numbers in statute. And I realize the other argument is, well, we can always change. We're not going to change it next year. We very well probably will if there's nothing in here for numbers. So that's my point.
The thrust of this amendment is no pay, no healthcare, or is it?
No, it doesn't affect the healthcare.
Okay, it just takes out all the pay sections.
Right.
So the getting very confusing messages from the speaker that I just don't know how to respond to while I'm
Yeah, probably say something like, you're up on the floor.
Yeah. So given the fact that we need to be up on the floor, I don't think we need to belabor this. The committee deliberated about this. We've taken a position that is this minimal pay increase that essentially turns back the clock to pre-2005 is where the committee landed. So is there any, I know we're going to have a difference of opinion on whether we should move forward with the pay starting in 2025, but is there any?
Motion again to just approve it as a motion.
Okay, Representative Hanger.
And I think it makes sense. I don't see what the rush is to set an amount that we're going to be getting paid.
Any further comments on this third amendment, Representative Boyd?
Correct me if I'm wrong, the one thing that doesn't make sense to me in this is that we have essentially moved the health benefits to the study, right? No.
Well, no, because the health benefits eligibility is still 25.
Never mind, we're talking about so many different pieces right now.
No, that's totally fair. There's a lot, there's a lot to consider. All right, so the motion that Representative Higley made was to find the third Harrison amendment favorable. I guess would be to adopt the motion, and then there would be to reject the motion and stick with the committee position that had to pay in the bill. So any other, Representative Cooper, go ahead.
Does this change in any way the meal reimbursement so that the per diem is done?
No, this gives the option either way. That was, yeah, it does give the option, but it was easier to strike a section and put that back in rather than strike subsection A or something. It was just easier that way, but no, it would still be the option that's in the original bill.
Okay. All right. So no more hands. Clerk shall commence to call the roll.
Representative Byron?
No.
Representative Boyden? No. Representative Randall?
Yes.
Representative Morgan?
Yes.
Representative Cooper of Burlington?
No.
Representative Markey?
No.
Representative Chase?
No.
Representative Waters Evans?
No.
Representative Cooper of Randolph?
No.
Representative Nugent?
No.
Representative Higley?
Yes.
Representative McCarthy?
No.
3-9-0.
Thank you for your time. See you upstairs. At least I didn't strike out, so I was concerned about that.
A couple of foul balls.
That's 333.
Should well look at.
Yeah, all right. So we have one more amendment to hear. Representative Peterson, would you like to take the chair? Welcome to House Gov.Ops.
Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to be here. I think.
We're nice, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us about your proposed amendment. At least you don't have three for us to pick from. We can.
No, this one, and it's pretty simple. First of all, Representative Rob Peterson, Rutland District 2. My amendment, which you all have seen, I assume, I just start out by saying a couple things that prevent folks from running for office here. One you've addressed is the pay. Pay, a lot of times doesn't make up for the lost pay that you take by coming here. The other thing is the time it takes. 18 weeks out of your life, 4.5 months, you have to be here. And my amendment would shorten the session to 12 weeks, which is 3 months. We'd be out of here by the 1st of April, roughly, maybe a week into April. If you work outside, which I know Representative Higley does, it dovetails with your work. It also saves money if you start to do the math. Next year, if the salary of $1,000 a week with your language. Right now, we make $812 a week. So it would save the taxpayer $610,000 by going only 12 weeks. The next year, 2026, would save $930,000. Vermont ranks 49th in population in the country. Yet 27 states have shorter sessions than we do. And I think this would help to align with our population, and it would lessen the impact on the taxpayer. And the optics, I think, would help the bill.
Representative.
I'm going to move we find this unfavorable, most especially since, especially in this committee on the floor, I've been continually hearing that we don't take enough time on the bills we have before us. And to suggest that we take less time, I think flies in the face of the feedback we've been getting from members. So I think in a complicated world, it's getting more and more complicated, to say we should take less time doesn't do justice to the work we're trying to do here.
Representative.
And I just like to say over the years, I mean, I put in a resolution years back because of the push for getting our work done here, and legislative council not having enough time to limit the number of bills that a member can present in a session. There's 13 other states at the time have that. So we did do some tweaking around, the time we have to present bills and all that sort of stuff, which supposedly helped, but I don't see that it really has. And also, I've always said for years that if we did have that sort of a system where, we may be only allowed to, I think what my proposal was, if I remember correctly, was, I think it was maybe, 3 or 5 bills. But again, it could be that if I had my 5 bills, I could have, you take on the other 5 bills. I wouldn't be the co-sponsor. In other words, another effort to prioritize more what we take up here. And I think this would do the same thing. I think if we cut down our number of weeks here, we would maybe, at least in my mind, from my constituency, maybe key in a little bit more on what's more important to the overall state of Vermont than some of the stuff that we do. So I certainly support this.
All right, got a bunch of hands. We'll go Representative Nugent, and then we'll go to the other side of the table.
I don't think this is like a totally outlandish idea, but I really, I'm looking forward to what the study committee comes up with, because I think that there's a whole bunch of competing priorities and needs, both in what we need to do for people in Vermont and what people in Vermont want. And so I would like to see this discussed, which it is going to be discussed in the study committee.
Senator Tanker.
One of the biggest things that I hear when people find out I'm a legislator is about the length of time we're here. It's not typically about the money, it's about the time. And I think this is a really reasonable idea just because of other states like Florida. Florida is a huge state geographically and population-wise, and they end around our town meeting time. So does the state of Virginia, which is also much bigger than us, has much bigger issues than us to deal with, and they get it done. And I don't think either of those states, and I don't know for sure, have more representatives than we do. So we certainly have a collective good number of people to work on legislation. So I don't think this is outlandish at all, and I totally support this. Thank you, Art.
Representative Hooper.
I don't think population is one of the keys to this. I think if you look over Kate's shoulder, you see a board that has a lot of bills that we were not able to get to. So the work is there. Maybe we talk too much, but a lot of good ideas are on that board. I hate to see half of them eliminated just because the clock ticked.
Which is actually what is happening in large part today. Representative Pierce, I want to say before we go on this.
Republican bills have been taken up on that board?
Well,
never mind.
Elections have consequences. Representative Peterson, I actually think that there's a lot of merit in considering the length of the legislative session. And I want the service working group to take a look at that. I also think that one of the things that we forget about other states that have shorter legislative sessions is that while their actual time voting on bills may be quite truncated, they often do things like allow some or all of their committees to meet full time in the off session. And so they only vote on bills during a very short period, but the legislatures work. And there's a variety of different factors that go into the state's decision and history about that. So for me, I think that we're just a little premature in setting this at 12 weeks. But I think this is seriously, and it's actually explicit, I believe, in the service working group that they're supposed to look at the length of the session. So while I'm not going to vote to support your amendment, I actually think it's part of the discussion that's really important.
Thank you.
Any other discussion before? I know we're late to the floor and I appreciate everybody's patience. All right. The clerk shall commence a call. Well, before you do, sorry, the motion was to find this unfavorable. So a yes would be to stick with the underlying committee proposal and a no supports the amendment.
Representative Barlow,
Yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Hingo?
No.
Representative Morgan?
No.
Representative Hooper Burlington?
Yes.
Representative Murphy?
Yes.
Representative Chase?
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans?
Yes.
Representative Hooper Randolph?
Yes.
Representative Nugent?
Yes.
Representative Higley?
No,
Representative McCarthy?
Yes.
9-3-0.
and if I can, Mr. Chair, just to let committee members know, they reserve the right, and will probably speak to some of these amendments.
And may I say something?
Yes, absolutely, Representative Henry.
I'm sorry, but that the comment about elections having consequences was inappropriate. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your consideration, folks. Thanks for listening.